Hi guys, it's Rob here and I'm back with another tutorial, and in this tutorial I'm going to teach you how to model Pikachu in Autodesk Maya. And this is a part of my Pokemon battle game tutorial series where I teach you how to make a full Pokemon battle game in Unity and using Unity and Maya. So let's get started. So I grabbed this picture from the internet. It's not mine. It belongs, all rights to the respected owner. And here, if we look at this Pikachu that I made here, what I did was I actually started out with a cube. So this is a technique called box modeling. So once we have that cube here, right, what I did, oops, just reset that here. And so we'll start out with a cube, so I'll make the cube. Now we got the cube. Now we make it about the size of Pikachu's head, and you can actually do this directly over the picture. So if you want to jump into your front view, you could jump in right there, hit the space bar after you highlight it. You'll jump into your front view. And we could make that basically the size of Pikachu's head. So you might be wondering, well, we have a cube, how do we make it into a sphere? Well, it's a two-step process to turn a cube into a sphere. So we're going to go Mesh, Smooth, and that smooths our mesh, smooths our cube there into a sphere. But I want to go one step further and hit the G key, and what that's going to do is add more polygons. And now when I scale this guy up, so it's our scale tool, I'll just reset the settings there because it's giving me issues once I click it. Okay. So now what I'll actually be able to do is I'll jump back into perspective, and I should be able to scale that up perfectly now. And there we go. So now I have that there. Okay, so next for the body, what I actually did was I decided to also use another cube. So what I did was I took this cube here, and now sort of a similar approach. So what I'm going to do here is I would just make this the width and height approximately of the body. And I'm not going to model the full Pikachu, I'm just going to show you the techniques and the methodology that I used. Right, so after that I started messing around with the vertices a little bit. But specifically what I did was, I believe I first added a smooth to it. So mesh tool, mesh, smooth. Okay, so now we're getting it to where it needs to be. Alright, get some polygons in there. And what you could actually do now is you could actually start pulling out faces. So his legs go here, so we'll pull out the faces. You can push this face back in, so he starts to have those knees now. And we basically just mess around with the mesh. Now one key thing that I did here, it may have been before I smoothed it, actually when it was in its box state, primitive object, was actually went up here to deform, and I believe I used a lattice deformer. So the lattice deformer, this is really cool. What the lattice deformer does is, so with an object you basically have vertices, and those are all the points that make up the object. But what the lattice deformer does is it'll group the vertices for you. So the lattice vertices will maneuver this object. So you'll see what I mean in just a second. Basically, by moving one of the lattice vertices, we can actually change the shape of this object a lot easier than moving the shape vertices. So it'll move significant portions of the mesh, but you'll still have that component access. And in order to get to this, it's a little tricky to get to how do you actually select the stuff here. You would go to Select, Components, Control Vertex. And now you're going to see here that all these things come up, these little vertexes here, these little vertices. And when I move one of these guys around, you'll notice that a lot of the mesh moves with it. A lot more than just one vertice if we were maneuvering it the traditional way. And what I like to do here is I like to move these guys around, but actually I'm going to put this back in its original state, this lattice, because I'm going to take you to the attribute editor here. And what you're going to notice here is that you could see all these divisions. S divisions, T divisions, U divisions. That's basically your X, Y, Z divisions, to make a long story short, or your length, width, height. I'm not sure in that order. But we'll see if we increase these, you'll notice that those points just came up. Right? So if we see Select, Components, Control Vertex. Right? So if I select one of these control vertexes here, let me actually select the lattice. There we go. And so now if I select one of these little control vertexes here, right? And what we could do is now you could start maneuvering these in the attribute editor, and that'll make it have a different number of divisions. So you'll have more points to control. So this gets a little crazy, so you don't want to do this many, but just to show you what that would look like. right? And you could start smoothing the mesh. So what I did, the reason I used this lattice deformer is because, like I said, it makes it a lot easier to move the individual than moving individual points around. But here's one key thing I want you to be aware of when using this lattice deformer. I want to just select, let's say, the geometry. So if I just go in and select geometry and I move this out of the lattice, well, let me actually make a few edits before I do this, just to better illustrate this concept to you. So I want to say that the control vertex, we want to select this lattice, move some of these guys around. So okay, this guy is here, and these guys are here. Okay, that's good. Alright, so now I want to jump into object mode, grab my object, and you notice as I move this out of the lattice, the deformations don't apply anymore. But then when I pull it towards the lattice, you'll see how the deformations are applying again. So one thing that you have to be mindful of is if you're in your outliner here, what you could actually do is select the lattice and the lattice base, don't forget, because the change in the mesh is actually calculated from the difference in the base, which is a lattice applied. When you hit that lattice button, it makes the lattice base and the lattice deformer, and the change between those two when you maneuver the deformer is actually what's changing the mesh. But if you select those as well as your cube here, or your cylinder now, let's say, your sphere, right, now we could move this anywhere we want without the deformation coming off. So that's one quick note on that. Now, another thing you might be wondering is, well, how exactly, okay, so I'm just going to pull this out intentionally here. How exactly do we sew Pikachu's body together, right? Because you could see that this is a separate object, this is a separate object, right? And but you'll see these are all together. Well, how did I get it to smoothly transition between the body and the head? Well, I actually did that in a very specific way, and that's a very specific technique that I used. So I'll actually pull this off of here to illustrate the concept. I'm going to pull it this way. And we're just going to make some space here for this guy. So I'm going to take this guy, move him here, take this guy, move him above him, and I'm going to show you this really quick. So what it's called is it's welding the vertices using the target weld tool. So let's just say I want to delete that there. Right, so I'll delete this guy. And I just want to get a clean selection. So shift double click one edge and shift double click the adjacent edge. And we have that there. Now we're going to pull this guy up, and we're going to say, and to make this work actually the best, you want to make sure that your bottom thing has the same number of divisions as your top guy. You don't necessarily have to do this. I didn't do this, but best practice is to do this. Now we're going to select these guys here, selected too many. So I'm just more key selecting by clicking, left mouse button clicking and then dragging. And I want to actually move this head down here. So now we're going to go, so for those of you that don't know, you can go into multi-component select mode here. So if I hit F8, and then I select vertex, and I select both objects, and I hit F8 again, that should allow me to select the vertexes on both objects, right? But F8 toggles that group selection on and off. But actually, to use this target weld tool, we have to use a different approach. We're going to highlight both of these objects, and we go to Mesh, Combine. Now, Combine doesn't actually physically combine the meshes. What it does, it combines the nodes of the meshes into one node, so it doesn't actually do anything to the mesh itself. So we have to take one step further to actually combine the vertices. So when we go to Vertex here, you'll notice that the vertex on both are highlighted because it's now one node. So if we go to Object Mode, right, these guys are both one node. You'll notice we don't have a pivot point. Modify Center Pivot. Now our pivot point's back here. So that's a really easy way to do that. We'll go to Vertex again. We're going to go to Mesh Tools, Target Weld. Now there's a few things to be mindful of when you're using this tool. First is that it won't work if your two objects are on different nodes. So you have to use that Mesh Combine technique to combine them into one single node. And now what we're going to do is we're going to see one of these vertices. And what I want to do is I want to take this vertice and weld it to this edge. So I'm going to left mouse button, click and hold, and I'm going to drag until I see that this vertex is highlighted and that it's extending towards that vertex. And when I release that left mouse button here, you're going to notice that it basically sewed the two together. Now for better results, you'd want to put the meshes closer together before you combine them into one node. But again, this is just illustration purposes that we're using this here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go around and just simply combine these. And a technique you could use if you have too many upper vertices versus lower ones, just put two to the same vertice, the same vertex rather. Okay, and we're just going around our mesh and sewing them together. And so you get the point. So then once we do that, we could smooth them out. We could do a bunch of different things to them, and that's really where the fun part comes in. Is that as you guys get to learn these tools, you're not just learning this tool haphazardly. You're actually using it to make a cool Pokemon, which we're going to use in our battle game. So that's actually pretty neat. So you'll see that the way I did it deformed a little bit. So, but when you do it, it might take a few tries. Took me a few tries. But once you get it right, it definitely comes out. You get it come out looking the way you want it to. And another thing is this little spacing right here. You'll notice that you're going to have to select some of the faces and drag them up to separate the two legs. So the last thing I want to show you guys, besides the tail, is also the feet. So for the feet, right, let's say we start out with this. Now remember, I told you that cube approach because it's a lot cleaner of an approach, a box modeling approach. Specifically, if you actually look at this geometry, you'll notice at the top here and at the bottom here there's a pole where multiple edges connect to this one vertice. And that's actually, you're supposed to have really four edges connecting to each vertex. You want to keep it quads. But when you have a bunch of n-gons here, all leading up to this vertex, that's called a pole when they all connect like that. And basically one way we could reduce our geo count here, our poly count, is actually to go into our attribute editor, and we'll just pull these things out. And you want to do that before you make any deformations. Usually 8 to 12 is a really good sphere if you're looking at it from far away. Now keep in mind it's not a really good sphere in terms of the 2020 that we just saw, but a really good game-ready sphere that you're not looking at close up. If you're going close up, you might want to do 12 to 15 or even more faces, depending on how important it is that this sphere look rounded. Now I'm just going to cut off this bottom here, and I suggest you do the same if we're going to make the feet here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into edge mode, and I'm going to shift double click these edges. Now you'll see I have a little ring right here around the base. I'm going to go to mesh fill hole. So now if you're wondering how I made the foot here, how I made it flat on the bottom, that's how I did that. Now one more trick. I know our time's running out here, so I'm going to have to continue with another Pikachu tutorial. It's going to have to be a two-parter on this one. Because we still have to go over, we haven't went over NURBS the polygons, how we made that mouth. We haven't went over texturing with our ambience here, or how to apply two separate textures to one object, two or more textures to one object. But what I am going to go over, one of the key parts of this, is creating a polygon by tracing the picture. So to do this we use our create polygon tool. Now one key thing that you want to remember is to go into your front view or another orthographic view before you do this. Zoom in on this little tail here. I'm actually going to close out the attribute editor to give us more space, and you'll see we have a nice tail right here where it's an orthographic view, and we have Pikachu's tail set up just like that. And thanks to whoever made this picture, because they made it a nice front view here for us. So now we're going to go to Mesh Tools, Create Polygon. Now with this tool, when I click, you'll notice that a vertex is laid down, right? And if I lay down multiple vertexes, right, I start to outline the shape of this tail. So let's say I made a mistake here. Now I didn't. You'll notice that this mesh is actually being created in the opposite direction, but when we lay down more vertices, it's going to define for Maya the region we want bounded into this polygon, and so you'll notice that that was no mistake there. But so it's important to recognize that because that gets confusing if you're a beginner. But once we lay out the basic shape of that tail, one thing I want to show you is if you make a mistake, hit backspace, you'll step back, step back, step back, right? So but once you have a good shape of that tail going, you want to hit enter to complete your polygon, and enter. There we go. And you'll see that it created a polygon like that. Sometimes you might have to hit enter twice. And now you're going to hit the W key, and you're going to grab this guy, and we're going to say, well, where the heck is this pivot? It's down there, so modify center pivot. Pull them out. Okay, now to do the finishing touches on this tail, it's going to be twofold. So I have a hotkey set up where actually extrude for me is Control E. If you don't have that set up, I highly suggest that you get that set up, and I could go over that in another video. But if you don't do that, what you could actually do is you come up here to Mesh. No, not Mesh. Actually, it used to be under Mesh, I believe, in one of the versions of Maya. But now they have it somewhere else. Mesh Components Extrude. And there we go. So now we'll notice it's turning black if we do it this way. So we could either do it that way and reverse the normals, or just go in the other direction. Black just means your mesh is inside out, and the normals are pointing in the wrong direction. And now we have a tail. But you'll notice something peculiar about my Pikachu's tail is that, or you should, is that some of the points here seem a little pulled in, like this guy here. It's not just fully square, or especially this guy right here. So the way I did that was I went into component mode, specifically edge mode, selected that edge, went into my scale tool, and I would see which one is our little horizontal scale guy. So for this case it's the Z in this case, and I would just scale these edges down like that, and that makes a much better Pikachu tail. So we'll go over how other techniques and texturing in another video. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching, and by now you should have most of the techniques that you need to begin modeling this Pikachu mesh. So I highly suggest you guys play around with it, or watch the next Pikachu video, and then jump in. But definitely don't watch all the videos at once and then do it. I'd approach the project by watching the videos for a specific Pokemon. I'd probably pause to take some notes, and then I'd watch it a second time just to make sure you don't miss any of the little button clicks, because sometimes, you know, you miss a right click to go into component mode or something like that, and that could lose you if you're not, you know, paying careful attention. But after you do that, I'd highly suggest you also download my Pikachu for reference, which will be uploaded onto my webpage very shortly. So you'll have access to that guy to download him and to use as an example, so you could actually jump in here and see, okay, I have this many faces, you know, not that that's very important, but just to see, you know, the approach that I used to make him. There's a lot of actually imperfections with this model, but really what I'm using these tutorials for is not to absolutely show you guys the perfect way to model, but I'm showing you guys some tricks and techniques to get a clean base mesh and a working base mesh, and to make these Pokemon and to throw them into a battle game. So I really want to show you the Maya and Unity, basically more techniques in them, their tools, their selection menus, and how you could use them for a game production workflow. So thanks for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial.